Your voice, your opinion, your community. Fact TV, free speech, protected.
Hello, welcome to The Long Road. I'm your host, Chris Roberts. We're going to talk about private equity. What is private equity and what does private equity have to do with you or me? But before I get onto the private equity, I just want to make sure I clarify something concerning what I said in last week's show concerning migrants being flown in the country from different countries, mostly South America and the Caribbean, like Haiti, Venezuela, Cuba. Okay. I did a little bit more research on that. According to the federal government, they are stating that the people have to get on the app, use the app, and get approved to come to the United States and to file an asylum claim. But it also said that the individuals had to pay their own plane ticket. So the United States government didn't worry about or didn't care about where you got your money for the plane ticket. But then again, a plane ticket from Venezuela or a plane ticket from Haiti, one way, maybe $500-600, and that would be an easy amount to get. Someone in the States could Venmo you that money. You can then buy a ticket, and then you could get on one of the chartered aircraft. One of the things it was saying, well, at least someone from Venezuela wouldn't have to go through Colombia and the Darien rainforest in Panama and up through Nicaragua, Guatemala, Mexico, up to the U.S. border. So I don't understand. I don't know how the system works, which ones get chosen over the other ones, because it wouldn't really make sense for me, if I'm in Venezuela, to pay a human trafficker $5,000-10,000 or maybe more to get me from Venezuela up to the United States. And when maybe I can get the app, go on the app, get approved, and get my ticket and fly on one of the flights into the United States. And because in the New York Post and some of the other ones, they were talking about the number of women. One woman was arrested. She said she only made $1,200, but she needed to come up with $3,000 a week to pay the traffickers that got her up into the United States. So to me, you know what? If I'm a young lady, I would much rather pay $700 to get on a plane, custom plane to bring me to the United States, get processed and moved on to another city, then have a smuggler get me in, and then I have to prostitute myself to earn the money to pay this smuggler back. And so I just wanted to clarify it and with a little bit more information, but anytime you get more information, it leads to additional questions. But I sometimes think that these well-educated people in the federal government think we're idiots and that we can't think for ourselves. Sometimes they're right, but most often they're not right at all. So back to the main topic of the show. I don't know if I'll be able to get everything done in this next 50 minutes. But you've been hearing the word private equity more and more. When I was doing research on the private equity and stuff, in the 5 areas around the city of Atlanta, private equity companies own 19,000 single-family homes. And they're charging rent. In most cases, the rent is pretty high. Other cases, if they can't get the right people, they're not renting the houses out at all. About 3-4 weeks ago, I had a phone call. The individual called me up and says, "You interested in selling your house?" I says, "No." He says, "Well, what about if I can give you an offer?" And he goes, $200,000. He goes, "Do I have you thinking now?" Excuse me. He says, "I'm going to pass you on to the next individual." Next individual comes on and says, we're willing to give you a cash offer on your house, sight unseen." And so I asked the guy, the second person says $124,000 to $176,000. I go, nope, hung up. For the next couple of weeks, I get badgered on my phone, text, and the third individual calls. He says, when we usually get people on the line and we get them to willing to listen, that people usually buy, usually sell out. He says, "What's wrong with you?" I says, "Well, I have no interest in selling my house." And he got ticked at me because I wouldn't sell my house. So basically, it's like, hey, cold call, say, hey, you know what? We'll pay a cash amount for your house. They get you hooked, and then it goes, oh, now you're going to lowball me. You're going to buy me a house, pay me way below what my house is appraised for. And so they want you to wiggle. Okay? They want my house because they're looking at it and they can say we can make money off of Mr. Roberts' house. Warren Buffett's company, Berkshire, bought tens of thousands of family houses, and they bought them when the interest rates were like 2-3%. It was hardly no risk to them. The prices of houses were going up, and they bought them, and the value, the capital gain part on of it, made them really successful and made them a lot of money. And so if you go in and want to buy a house, and you can tell when you go around looking at the for sale signs, there's a high probability if you're seeing the for sale signs out of one of those big national companies that do high-end housing and sales, which is owned by Berkshire Hatfield, then not a local, you have to compete with them. And they're doing it just to make money, not to improve the neighborhood, and they're looking at it to make a quick buck. Okay, and so what private equity has been doing is finding a way to use other people's money to buy stuff and then sell off a lot of that stuff at a profit. Well, so I got a couple of things. I got Harvard Medical and Research. They did what happens when a private equity takes over a hospital. The one recently in Atlanta, Atlanta magazine, less than a year ago, when private equity firms bankrupt their own companies, and then kind of a detailed report from Harvard Business School research on what private equity has been doing. And the one from Atlantic and the one from Harvard, in their case studies, they're going to do, excuse me, they talk about a company that we already know, Friendly's. Keene used to have 2 Friendly's, and now we have none. Friendly's was really big around New England, and now it's pretty much gone. It goes, private equity firms buy businesses in hope of flipping them for a profit a few years later. So a private equity company does not have any long-term future. They're looking at how can I buy something and get it done and turn over it real quickly. Well, if I go in and buy a company that's not doing really well and look at the long-term future, and then you're a private equity fund going in to look for a short-term profit, the private equity companies have 10 times likely to go bankrupt than other people coming in investing money into those companies. Friendly's, it was started during the Great Depression. Their mother made their coffee-flavored syrup, something most people only from New England know or drank coffee-flavored syrup. The brothers worked. One worked at night. The other one worked in the day so they can sleep, making their ice cream. Then when they went to war, they said, we're closing down Friendlies and we will not open up Friendlies again until we win the war. The owners, the Blake brothers, finally retired, and then Friendlies circled through a series of owners in 2007 when it was acquired by the private equity firm Sun Capital. Under Sun's Capital's ownership, Friendly struggled. Among other things, the private equity firm piled debt into the business. Okay, so it went to Friendlies and says, okay guys, we own the property that your store is under. And so what we're going to do is, if you want to stay there, you have to sell the store to us and we'll lease it back to you and lease back the property for some 160 Friendly restaurants. Okay, but the lease back and property rent was so high, but Friendlies couldn't pay. But every month that was going by, Sun Capital was making money off of Friendlies. But Sun Capital owned Friendlies. But it would go, so why is Sun Capital making the people making Friendlies buy back? Sun Capital buy Friendlies and says, Friendlies, oh, you got to pay his rent and you got to lease the buildings at a higher rate from us. And you go, wait a minute, Sun Capital owns it? Why are they doing this? Because it doesn't make any business sense. But it got to a point that Sun Capital put Friendlies back into bankrupt. So under Sun Capital's ownership, again, if you probably hear, is Delaware. Corporations want to either go to Delaware or South Dakota. Delaware is so corporate friendly, and South Dakota has unlimited interest rates on debt. So Sun Capital has Friendlies owners file for bankruptcy in Delaware. Then Friendlies lawyers tell the judge, we got to do this sale real quick. Okay? Through a bankruptcy process called a 363 sale. The Friendlies was then auctioned off free of its prior debts. You go, wait a minute. So all these other things that Friendly owns, they're going for bankrupt. See, but Sun Capital owns Friendly, so wouldn't Sun Capital suffer a cost? Well, no. So, say for example, Sun Friendly says, you know what? I got $200 million in debt. Okay? So, Sun Capital decided we're going to buy Friendlies out of bankruptcy. And how are we going to buy Friendlies out of bankruptcy? Okay, what we'll do is we will forgive Friendlies $200 million in debt. It's a tactic known as credit bidding. But the thing was, only Sun Capital could do this. Anybody else who wanted to bid for Friendlies out of bankruptcy had to come up with real money. So if it was going to cost $200 million, so if I wanted to buy Friendlies, I would have to come up with $200 million. Bank loans, cash, stock, that's what I would have to do. But Sun Capital goes, you know what? We'll take Friendlies and we'll wipe out Friendlies $200 million. So you go, that's pretty nice of Sun Capital. Why? So they had a company, they bankrupted the company, then they said, we will buy the company back based on by writing off their debts. But we're the only one who can do that, but everyone else has to come up with real cash. So, bingo. What is the benefit for Sun Capital of doing that? You remember when I said that Friendlies was put up for sale because all its other debts, quote, were going to be wiped out. Okay? At the time of bankruptcy, Friendlies had $115 million in pension liabilities. Okay? So by selling Friendlies to one of its affiliates, Sun Capital sold Friendlies to one of its affiliates that falls on them, Sun Capital reacquired its own company free and clear of those liabilities. So I bankrupt Friendlies. I then go and say, I sell Friendly to a subdivision in my company. So I now get the company Friendlies back, but the $115 million in pensions is gone. So that's $115 million of obligation that is completely gone. Well, but what happens to that $115 million liability? Well, that goes on to the federal government. The Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation, a government charter insurance that rescues underfunded pension and whose work was paid for by other more responsible pending funds. Sun Capital was able to reacquire Friendlies free of its pension obligation without spending any of the money that it had lent out. So, anything more than the money that it had lent out. Pensioners lost in this process because their payments were at risk of being cut, and they were cut. Many of the changed existing employees lost that well. So part of this bankruptcy deal, 63 Friendlies were closed. When the New York Times in 2020 and 2012 asked about the failure of Friendlies and its argued manipulation of the bankruptcy law, the co-founder for Sun Capital says, quote, "We don't make the rules." Friendly wasn't Sun Capital's only victim. The firm similarly pushed the Midwest grocer Marsh Supermarket into bankruptcy. Marsh at the time owed $62 million in pension obligation to its warehouse, plus $1 million more to the store employees. But look at this. A separate fund for the company's executives remain fully funded. So that $62 million in obligation for pensioners went to the federally chartered and millions more for its other store employees. Through bankruptcy, Sun Capital was able to offload Marsh's unfunded pension obligations. They engaged in similar pension laundering in the works of the PBGC director with the aluminum pot maker and the Lex and generator manufacturer PowerMate. Sun Capital shows a recurring enthusiasm for abandoning the pensions of the company it bought. The Sun Capital disregard for friendly workers extended beyond the effort to dump its pension obligations. The company could have provided advance notice of the impending shutdown to workers at the 63 restaurants slated to be closed as part of the bankruptcy filing. Since the bankruptcy was clearly planned well in ahead, instead, workers at those stores were told one evening that the next day would be their last. About 1,260 employees, well over 10% of the company's workforce of 10,000, were laid off. The WARN Act requires companies to give 90-day advance notice of a mass layoff, but only if the company has 50 or more full-time employees at a particular site. No Friendlies had 50 or more full-time workers. Most of the workers at Friendlies were part-time. In New York, they have its own WARN Act at 25 or more workers. It was possible that up to 6 of the closed Friendlies in New York may have had 25 or more full-time employees. And so over 1,200 employees get a 24-hour notice. And so it's not the first time Sun Capital firm was burdened with debt, saddled with above market rent and sales leaseback agreements for facilities, and refused an injection of cash from the private equity firm that could help it survive. The bankruptcy of West Coast department store Mervyn's. We used to shop there quite a bit. Great store. Resulted in 30,000 people losing their jobs and vendors getting stiffed out of over $100 million in product. And so He's done it before. Family friendly family restaurant, ice cream chain. And so that's what a venture capitalist does. Not all are self-serving, as this stuff shows. Sun Capital's not the only one. Watson 13 and Company and the Hatfield Capital Management LP brought the specialty food realtor Harry and David. They also forced the company into bankruptcy and pushed pension obligations onto the pension insurer, but not before giving themselves $80 million in dividends. Similarly, another private equity firm bought the grocer A&P, we know about A&P out of bankruptcy, and sent it back in a few years, pushing the pension obligation in the pot. When it declared bankruptcy a second time, it did not nearly achieve as much was needed to turn around the business. When I go to the Harvard one in 2015, Harvard said private equity pushed more than, from 2001 to 2014, pushed more than 50 companies into bankruptcy and shredded more than $1.5 billion in pension obligations. And in the process, pensioners lost $128 million in benefits. And the thing about the capital venture, I can get tax breaks by writing off debt. So if I use 80, quote, I find a way, use 80% to buy a company, I use, say, 80, 90% of debt, bad debt, to buy the company, or we'll just say debt. Debt is not bad until you stop paying for it. So I use that debt to buy that company. I extract as much profit out of that company. And then if the company goes bankrupt, then I can use that debt as a tax deduction, because debt is good. The one with Michael Douglas and Leonardo Capaccio, can't pronounce the word, where they were just being hedge funds and venture funds, just buying out, I think it was the Wolf of Wall Street, just buying out companies to sell them, not caring what happened to the people. And so we'll go to this one. Do private equity firms, do you know that private equity firms can affect your health and could even cost you your life? And you go, what do you mean? Well, what happens when private equity takes over a hospital? By Jake Miller, December 26, 2023, from Harvard Medical School. At a glance, right off the bat, a national study of quality of care in hospitals acquired by private equity shows worsening or a much higher increase of falls and a higher infection risk and other measurements of quality and safety. Some post-procedure adverse events increase even through private equity hospitals perform fewer patient procedures among young and less disadvantaged, it's older and less fewer procedures. The new findings amplify existing economic concerns about the growth of this for-profit ownership model. The findings come amidst growing concerns about private equity increasing their role in healthcare. Within the last 10 years, $1 trillion was invested by private equity firms in buying up hospitals, nonprofit hospitals. Hospital success is measured not only in dollars or the number of patients who pass through the doors, but also in the life saved, complication rates, patient satisfaction, and a number of other quality and safety metrics. The hospital medical researcher, a physician at Mass General Hospital, we need to make sure we fully understand the costs and benefits of predominantly new force in healthcare. Again, the economic repercussions of private equity acquisitions are not a new concern. Previous studies of Dr. Brunch from the University of Chicago indicates that this high debt for profits financial model of hospital ownership may also be leading to increased spending and other economic implications. Many have expressed concern about hospital bankruptcies under private equity ownerships that often leave underserving populations with limited access to care. Hey, if, for example, if I was a private equity company and I came in and bought Cheshire Medical and I tried to extract as much money as possible out of it, and I can't get any more by providing medical service, and the easiest way for me to get my last piece of investment reward is allowing the hospital to go bankrupt so I can take the tax break, I'm going to do it because I have no loyalty to the hospital and I have no loyalty to the city of Keene. And in a lot of times, they will come in by the hospital, put their own people in, with their number one priority is to increase profitability or return on investment. Not profitability, but return on investment. When a health system buys hospitals, they generally do not use borrowed money. In contrast, the classic private equity buyout uses a small amount of cash and a large amount of debt. Because if I'm going to come in and take a loan out to buy it, I have to go to bank institutes or things like that. And there's rules and federal stuff that I have to follow. There's reports I have to give. But say, for example, I go and say, hey, I need $2 billion to buy Cheshire Medical. I can go, for example, some like Elon Musk and say, hey, I need some help from you. Can you do this? This is what I expect your return on investment to be. Cheshire Medical is $1 billion in the hole. I'm just using this to make me up. But for $2 billion, I can buy the whole thing. Okay, and so basically, I only need $1 billion because we're going to make a way to make that debt as part of the cost. I'll go to Cheshire Medical and say, yeah, you're worth $2 billion, but you got $1 billion in debt. So this is what we're going to do. I'm going to give you $1 billion, and I'm going to take your debt away from you. So the people in Cheshire Medical, they've got their value. And so, bingo. That's $1 billion I didn't have to come up with. I'm just saying, hey, I'm going to buy your debt for you. I will take away your debt from you. The debt doesn't go away. The debt is still there, which I can use at a later date. A private equity firm raises some capital from investment, borrows the rest, putting debt on the required hospital with its physical assets such as land, building, as collateral for a loan. The required hospital must then generate revenue to pay down their debt. So, hey, I buy the hospital. So the assets of the hospital are $1 billion. All of a sudden, that $1 billion becomes collateral. And so you got to pay down some of this loan and all this other stuff. Well, my newly instilled leader, CEO or Chief Financial Officer of the newly acquired for-profit Cheshire Medical has to come up with money. He has to make money, he or she has to make money to cover those monthly payments. So the private equity generates revenue by charging management fees to its investors. The pension fund. Oh yeah, we do have a pension fund of $100 million. Okay, we're going to charge you 5% a year to take care of that. The endowment, you have an endowment of $120 million, we're going to charge you 5%. You have this thing working for you, we're going to charge all these management fees. And then it goes, we only want high revenue procedures, cost cut and reorganization, financial engineering. Yeah, I bet you didn't learn that one in school. Private equity firms want to buy growing concerns that are able to take on debt and generate revenue in the short term. These financial pressures can create perverse incentives favoring profit over patience, the researchers have shown. For the study, the researchers examined insurance claim data for all fee-for-service Medicare hospitalization from 2009 to 2012, totaling more than 600,000 hospitalizations at 51 private equity hospitals and more than 4 million hospitalizations at 259 similar hospitals, basically for not-for-profit hospitals. The hospitals not acquired by private equity served as a control group to control for other factors may affect the outcome. The researchers compared how patients experienced certain outcomes before and after the hospital was required by private equity. For example, they looked at how often patients fell while in the hospital, how often they developed an infection after procedure or surgery. They also analyzed the makeup of the patient's population, various outcomes, such as how often patient died, how often they stayed at the hospital, and how often they ended up being readmitted. After a hospital was required by private equity, admitted Medicare patients had a 25% in increased hospital-acquired complications compared to patients before acquisitions. Patients all had a 27% more falls and 38% more bloodstream infections caused by central, those temporary surgically inserted ports, so they can put intravenous access, receiving repeated drug infusions or other treatment, that would increase 38. This was seen despite private equity hospitals placing 16% lower central lines before the buyout. So the number of lines they put in and ports they put in dropped by 16%, but the number of infections increased by 38%. All these results were calculated while taking into account changes, trends, and patterns over the time period at peer hospitals not owned by private equity to isolate the the differences that were due to change in ownership. The study also showed a small drop in hospital deaths at private equity hospitals. This, the research say, may be due to social and demographic factors. This is where the front part was wrong. Private equity patients were younger than at a regular hospital. A nonprofit hospital took in more older people. For-profit hospitals took in more younger people after they went. Also, for nonprofit hospitals, they not only took in Medicare, but they also took in Medicaid. For-profit hospitals, they took in less poor people. If you were younger and you had good insurance and things like that, you were going to be more than welcome into a for-profit hospital. I remember a few years ago, I was told that Cheshire Medical spends about $4 million a year in what's called charity care. They write off over $4 million to take care of people because in this area right here, we get a lot of people in low income. We get a lot of people on Medicaid. We get a lot of people on the different Obamacare stuff, but so But a lot of these people wouldn't be getting through the front door to in the profit. And you go, hey, Mr. Roberts, you're wrong. A hospital has to take anybody that comes into the emergency room. That's right. Anybody that comes into the emergency room, but I don't have to, if I'm a private doctor, I don't have to take any Medicaid patients. Or I don't even have to take Medicare patients. But the other part is, yes, I have to take you if you show up in my emergency room. But I don't have to keep you. You go, what do you mean? If I'm showing up in the emergency room and I need services, what does that mean? You don't have to. No. All I have to do is stabilize you. And the research shows more patients get transferred out of for-profit hospitals than for non-profit hospitals. The company guy goes, I'm here to make a profit. You know what? If I can have you and stabilize you, as soon as I stabilize you, I'm sending you out to some other place, someplace that has to take you. And so, and the you remember when I said that for people that in profit hospitals, for-profit hospitals had a lower death rate than for non-profit hospitals? Within a month of leaving the hospital, a profit hospital, the death rate increased to the point it was higher than non-profit hospitals. So that means is they were finding ways, hey, we got to get this guy out of here. We got to get this woman out of here. Hey, they're going to cost us money. Medicare isn't going to cover everything. I don't want this person dying at my place because not a moneymaker. So they find a way to ship you out to another hospital. So you get shipped out to a community hospital or things like that, and then bing, you die. It's an increased risk. They do procedures to make sure you don't die on their watch, because you dying on their watch is not a moneymaker. The other thing, what they would be doing is, wow, why am I getting 52 blood tests when I got a stomach problem? Because they know the federal government, whether it's Medicare or whatever, is only going to pay so much. So if it goes in, okay, the federal government's going to pay $12 for an EKG. Oh, it takes us in a minute. Let's run the EKG. Oh, let's do all this blood work. I'm going to get paid so much for each of this blood work. So it's called kind of like stacking, putting all these procedures on, knowing that you're only going to get paid a certain amount for each one. But even if you get $13 for an EKG, it doesn't cost you $13 to do an EKG. You can do an EKG and hey, you might make $3 or $4 here, so then when time the bill comes and time you get a payment from the insurance company or you get from Medicare, you're going to make a profit off each individual. Okay, insurance companies are getting really concerned too, because insurance companies, their job is to reduce costs and make a profit. And out of their real own self-interest, they're finding that these hospitals that are owned by venture capitalists are finding ways to tweak out every single penny possible from the insurance companies. And what they're finding out is the quality of the service provided by for-profit, venture-owned hospitals is not getting the same standards as a nonprofit hospital. And nonprofit hospitals stay around. Venture capitals, when they're no longer making a profit, they'll shut it down. And there's hundreds of hospitals around the United States that have been shut down by venture capitalists. So those are the two things. I wanted to get the A&P, I wanted to get the hospitalization in, and friendlies. This is what venture capitalists do. They're not here to benefit us, they're really here to screw us. So that's all it for this week, and have a good day.